focused on the year that's been rather than the year that is to be, and I trust your questions will be similar. Sitting next to me from the Treasury are Deputy Chief Executives Rowan Little and Jane Winfield, Chief Government Accountant. We're not joined by the new Secretary for the Treasury, Ian Rooney, today because he was involved in auditing the statements of these financial statements, so he has chosen to recuse himself from this, although he will be available for your questions tomorrow. If the Chair permits, I'll just make some brief introductory remarks. I've timed them. They should be brief. Good. In a political sense, the 23-24 financial year was a game of two halves. The previous Labor government was in office for the first part of the year, and it set the budget. That was in Budget 2023. Budget 2023 was, by all measures, a very big spending affair. The capital package alone, excluding the National Resilience Plan, was $10.7 billion, around which, about $6 billion of which was for Kainga-Ora. The operating package raised net spending in 23-24 by $5.6 billion. In the second half of the year, the current government corrected course. We pulled back operating spending by $1.1 billion in the mini-budget and in Budget 2024. If we had not taken those remedial steps, the Obergall deficit, the operating balance before gains and losses, would have been $1.1 billion worse. 2023-24 was a difficult year for the economy. The Reserve Bank kept interest rates high to fight inflation, which started the year at 6%. And as a result of high interest rates, economic growth was low or negative in each quarter. That affected tax revenue, which has a direct effect on the government's books. Those books were not in great shape at the end of 23-24. Total expenses were $180 billion, almost $80 billion higher than just 6 years earlier. For 5 years, expenses have been higher than revenue and the books have been in deficit. The Obergall deficit in 23-24 was $12.9 billion. It is important to note that Obergall is a whole of government measure, so it includes the performance of Crown entities and state-owned enterprises. In the last financial year, ACC alone contributed $4.1 billion to the Obergall deficit, a third of the total. The Fiscal Strategy report in May identified that having large Crown entity deficits in the headline operating balance indicator risks undesirable fiscal strategy responses, especially if those Crown entities are self-funding and financially sustainable. The Fiscal Strategy report said there is an argument to exclude those sorts of entities, of which ACC is the prime and key example, from the headline indicator. And I will have more to say about our review of those indicators in the budget policy statement later this month. Net debt at the end of the financial year was 42.5% of gross domestic product, which was slightly lower than had been forecast in the last few updates, including the update before the election. Nonetheless, 5 years before, net debt was under 20% of GDP. To put that in dollar terms, New Zealand's net debt has increased by $118 billion in just 5 years. That debt does need to come down as a proportion of gross domestic product. Recent increases in debt have reduced New Zealand's ability to cope with future shocks, be they weather-related, pandemic-related, global affairs-related. So the debt buffer does need to be restored. Overall, the financial statements show that New Zealand's fiscal position has deteriorated over the past 6 years, and that is a situation that is hard to turn around. The task hasn't been helped by ongoing forecast revisions. Each downward revision of the Treasury's economic growth forecast has made it harder for the government to bring revenue and expenditure back into balance and harder to put net debt to GDP on a downward trajectory. But both those things need to happen, and that is reflected in our fiscal strategy. Looking ahead, the next fiscal check-in is in 2 weeks, as I say, when I release the budget policy statement and Treasury publishes its half-year update. If I can conclude, where New Zealand sits right now, I see 3 paths for us. The first is a path in which we blindly bake in unsustainable levels of government spending and budget deficits into the future. This would lead to accelerating debt levels, less and less buffer for emerging demographic challenges and external events. I know some members opposite have indicated their comfort with that course, with perpetually delayed surpluses and additional debt. I would say to those members, there be dragons.
Sorry,
the second path that we could choose to take is a dramatic and sudden reduction in government spending in order to urgently bring the books back to balance. The judgment I and the government have made is that that is both unnecessary and would also result in painful impacts for New Zealanders, requiring ultimately significant reductions in welfare supports and frontline services. The third path, and the path that we have chosen as a government, is the balanced path, in which we commit to gradual consolidation of the government spending position and in which we commit to growth as the key lever for returning our books to health. Ultimately, members, it is growth in the economy that will give New Zealanders the better job choices and opportunities we all desire for them. And ultimately, it is growth that will put our books in a healthy position to invest more in the frontline services we all believe in, but also to ensure that we leave a sustainable financial situation for our children and grandchildren. I'll leave my remarks there.
Thank you very much.
She's bringing balance to the force. Okay, so you can see how with her opening statement, I fell down a complete rabbit hole. So you mentioned this one, mentioned this thing, this. I was like, okay, I've got to read all the reports. So what is the National Resilience Plan? Okay, so the National Resilience Plan was a program that was established by Labor to deal with North Island weather events, so things like your cyclones and your floods in Auckland. 6 billion was put aside from the multi-year capital allowance, or MYCA, to provide flexibility in project funding. In stopping this approach, as Nicola said, means that funds will be returned to the centre and remain available for projects prioritised by Cabinet. So basically she did a yoink, we're going to take that money back. And I'm going to quote her. Using traditional budget processes is preferable, since by assessing proposals through standard Cabinet decision processes, we'll be better supported to make system-wide trade-offs, which ensures that our funding decisions support high-value and priority proposals, aka, and I'm going to insert this one in, aka roads. I seek agreement to discontinue the NRP and return unallocated funds of 3.239, etc., billion to the MYCA and budget 2024 operating allowance. There's so much I could talk about. I could go into Kying Order, I could go into the ACC, go into COVID response.
How long are we going to be here tonight if you did?
We will never get the show done. But yeah, so I'll just tackle one thing at a time as they come up. But yeah,
Okay.
I just thought it was good to bring up National Resilience Plan and what.
Sorry, and I hope Frosty gets his camera sorted by the sound.